Hola mis amigos y bienvenidos a una lección sobre participios pasados, past participles. It's an exciting time as we lay this foundation for our next verb tense. But before bringing in that new verb tense, we're just going to focus on past participles. Whenever we bring up things like past participles, the first and most uncomfortable question is, oh, what the heck is a past participle in English before we even learn it in Spanish, verdad? And that's fine. I didn't know what a past participle was before studying Spanish either. So let's take a look. Bien, ¿qué es un participio pasado? Here are some examples in English. The window is closed. In this case, closed is a past participle. It's actually an adjective that describes the state of the window. The check is signed. My watch is broken. The letter is written. Our homework is done. Beauty is seen everywhere. All of these underlined words are past participles, and they describe the noun that was already mentioned in the sentence. Okay, so ¿cómo los formamos en español? Now that we know what past participles are in English, how are we going to form them in Spanish? It's relatively simple. If you're dealing with an AR verb, you drop the AR and add ado. If you're dealing with an ER verb, you drop the ER and add ido. And if you're dealing with an IR verb, you also drop the ending and add ido. It's really important, though, to always start with the infinitive. Don't try to start with some other form of the verb. So, for example, hablar becomes hablado. Aprender becomes aprendido. Vivir becomes vivido. So those are three good examples of regular past participles in español. Bien, you already know some past participles, believe it or not. Lo que ya sabes. Here are some that you already know. Cansado is a past participle. It's actually the past participle of the infinitive cansar, which is to tire. And you've used it before to say things like, estoy cansado hoy. I'm tired today. You also already know aburrido, bored, from the infinitive aburrir, to bore. Elena nunca está aburrida en la clase de español. Interesado, interested, from the infinitivo interesar. Estamos muy interesados en la salud. So that's a nice connection between what you're learning and what you already know with those three past participles. Bien. So the logical question for language learners at this point, and you've probably gotten used to this by now. Okay, that sounded pretty simple with ado and ido. But of course, we're going to have some irregulares. These are the irregular past participles in Spanish, and there's only one way to deal with them. You have to memorize them. And as is always the case with irregulars, they are some of the most commonly used verbs in the language. So you can't make it your policy just to avoid them, because they're really infinitives that you can't avoid in everyday life. So let's start the process of becoming familiar with them. The past participle of abrir is abierto. Of decir, dicho. Describir, descrito. Descubrir, descubierto. Escribir, escrito. Freír, frito. That one's not in the text, but I just can't resist teaching you the past participle for to fry. Fried is frito. The good example of that one is pollo frito, fried chicken. Okay? Hacer, hecho. Morir, muerto. Poner, puesto. Resolver, resuelto. Romper, roto. Ver, visto. Volver, vuelto. And I really encourage you, in addition to memorizing these irregular past participles and getting to know them well, also make sure you know the meanings of all of these infinitives. Some of them might merit a little bit of review. Maybe ones like morir, to die, or romper, to break. No sé, I don't know what's the case for you, but make sure you know these infinitives before you get too far along. Bien, another aspect of past participles to be aware of, there are a few that require a written accent mark, and I have those here for you. Caído, creído, leído, oído, reído, sonreído, and traído. Again, make sure you know the meanings of all of these infinitives. And remember the fact that they all require a written accent. And you can see what they all have in common. It's where two vowels come together, and the weaker one needs to be accented, so the I gets the accent in that case. Bien, so let's talk a little more about this. We're dealing with el participio pasado como adjetivo. The past participle is an adjective. Recuerdan, we use estar when we're dealing with condiciones. Hopefully you learned a while back that estar is for conditions. So these past participles often end up being conditions. Look at these examples. El gimnasio está cerrado. I use the estar as my verb to express the gym is closed. We're describing the state, the condition of the gym. El gimnasio está cerrado. La tarea de los estudiantes ya está terminada. Notice again I use the está because it's a condition. The homework of the students is already finished. Los peces de Juanito están muertos. The fish of Juanito are dead. Sorry, fishies. Están muertos. The other important thing to be keeping in mind here, ojo, watch out for this. Watch out for concordancia de sujeto y adjetivo. And I showed that to you in red above. Gimnasio and cerrado agree. Tarea and terminada agree. Peces and muertos agree. This is probably the most important thing you'll need to keep in mind with your past participles, keeping in mind agreement. Okay, so let's get in a little practice, a real basic practice here. Vamos a formar participios pasados. You're going to make a past participle for each one of these infinitives. There's nothing here for them to even agree with, so just put them all in the masculine form. Keep in mind your basic endings for past participles as well as the irregulars that you're starting to get to know. Push pause and then check yourself. Bien, so here we have our past participles. Bebido, nadado, escrito, that's an irregular. Corrido, leído, note that accent mark. Hecho, another irregular. Cantado, vuelto, an irregular. Comido, and dicho, another irregular. Okay? So watching out for those irregulares and keeping in mind those ado, ido endings for participios pasados. Bien, let's dig in a little deeper now that you've had that basic practice and describe a little more. This time, this is the real deal. This is like real life communication, so you'll need to keep in mind your agreements. And you're going to write a little sentence describing what you see for each picture. So for number 1, the subject is el niño, and you're going to describe what he looks like. Well, he looks pretty bored to me. The boy is bored will be your sentence. And you can go on like that. I'll help you with these pictures a little bit to get you moving. Dos, the window is broken. With tres, look at what that tombstone says. Aquí descansa en paz, mi amor por ti. Here rests in peace, my love for you. So for number 3, love is dead. Triste, ¿verdad? 4, the books are open, and 5, the beds are made. The beds are made. So with those cues given to keep you on track, push pause and write a sentence for each one using past participles to describe what you see. Don't forget your agreements. In here you have answers for these. It's possible there might be other answers, but these are pretty straightforward ones. El niño está aburrido. La ventana está rota. Note that agreement. El amor está muerto. Los libros están abiertos. Plural. Las camas están hechas. Both feminine and plural for that one. Bien? Hope that went well for you. Bien. Finally, I thought I'd put up a few conversation questions using participios pasados. So if you have someone to chat with or if you're needing some writing practice, these are great questions to inspire either one, to chat it up with someone or write out some answers and see how you're doing with your communication, keeping in mind your past participles, agreements, etc. And finally, in wrapping up, let's see, ¿estás de acuerdo? Do you agree with this little statement? El problema de las mentes cerradas es que siempre tienen la boca abierta. Take a moment and contemplate that idea. Notice the two participios pasados that are used, cerradas and abierta. The problem with closed minds is that they always have the mouth open. Have you noticed that? That those who have closed minds tend to have an open mouth? Interesante, ¿verdad? Bueno, muchas gracias, buena suerte con todo y hasta la próxima. Gracias.